Hello and welcome to the College Rugby Show. I'm your host, Pat Clifton. We've got episode 2 for you. I'll be joined by Wendy Young of Your Scrum Half Connection and the voice of Friday Night Rugby, as well as making his College Rugby Show debut, Lance Kavanaugh, the great American rugby guru. We've got a great episode lined up for you. Top 5 highlights coming up later. We're going to zoom in on the phenomenon of player coaches in college rugby, talk who's overrated and who's underrated as we near the playoff push, look back at the last few weeks of Friday Night Rugby action, and then ahead to tonight's doubleheader. But first, let's dig up some dirt on the divisions. All right, folks, this is the part of the show where we dig up a little bit of dirt on all of the divisions throughout college rugby, all 3 in women's college rugby, all 4 in men. Let's start with you, Wendy, and women's college rugby. What are the top headlines as we're entering here into November in playoff play?
Oh, Pat, so exciting. It's a really good time of year. I'm going to start with women's D1, and it's a battle of the undefeated. 5 of the top 6 teams are unbeaten, but whose strength of schedule will best prepare them for what's shaping up to be the toughest D1 playoff bracket in NCR history. Wheeling faces a huge test this weekend against number 6 Walsh. Can they stay unbeaten? Postseason hopes on the line. Michigan and UNI are keeping sharp while waiting for their first round opponents decided this weekend. Virginia's run for playoff hinges on an unbeaten streak through their 2-match conference championship, and SNU, with an out-of-conference loss to BYU and Lindenwood, may finally be primed to make it to past the quarterfinal round for the first time in team history. Then on to women's D2, and it's also all on the line. Cincinnati is the only top 10 team locked in, while the others battle it out in some fierce intra-top 10 matchups. The Tri-State Championship weekend kicks off with number 2 Vassar facing number 20 Marist and number 5 Fairfield taking on RPI. They're both finalists. They secure their spots at regionals, but the champion will be determined on November 9th in their seeding. Number 3, Coast Guard, fresh off a dominant Friday Night Rugby matchup, meets a rising number 5 New Hampshire on November 10th. And then the Cinderella story, William and Mary, number 8, they're set to face the Delaware Blue Hens for the MARC Championship after toppling Temple and Kutztown. Meanwhile, number 1, UW Eau Claire takes the favorite position in the Great Waters Championship weekend, and number 8, Coastal Carolina is poised to win Sark's Championship, hosted by the Chanticleers. Finally, in women's D3, can they keep the momentum? Endicott stands perfect with a staggering 413-point differential over their 6-0 season. Other teams in the top 20 are also undefeated. The top 10 landscape, however, is marked by fierce competition, including number 5's Yale's bid to topple Endicott in their conference championship next weekend. Number 2, Wayne State only setback came against a combined Northern Lights team, a test that readied them for the Kansas City Regional. Heavy hitters number 4, Colorado Schools of Mines, and number 3, UW Platteville have taken losses to higher division teams, yet they remain strong contenders heading into their conference championships. For these teams, each loss has been a lesson, sharpening for their quest to claim the D3 national title.
Boy, I can't wait. November 16th, the regionals are coming right here to Kansas City. They're going to be at the Kansas City Current Training Facility. That's the first ever professional women's soccer stadium. It was a women's specific sports stadium built ever in the world was right here. And we're going to have the NCR Women's Regionals November 16th with a number of those teams that you just mentioned. And I cannot wait to get my eyes on Wayne State, on Southern Nazarene, some of these other teams. And now we're going to throw it over to Lance to dig up some dirt on the men's divisions going through men's Division 1, D1 AA, D2, and D3. Lance, what's going on?
Playoff time is here. Most teams are going to compete for semifinal action this weekend, and a few finishing out their regular season, but it is going to be a barn burner to the very end. In D1 action, Brown University remains undefeated after handling Dartmouth at home. What do you expect? Number 1 team in the nation. The former number 1 team, Queens University, dropping their first match of the year against Penn State. Brown and Principia are the only 2 undefeated teams in D1. Can they keep it that way as we head into championship season? And men's D1 AA action, Bowling Green State University still flying high over the 1-point upset of Louisville. Kentucky remaining undefeated going into conference semifinals. The 8-0 UMass are hosting in Liberty semifinal action UConn. That is going to be a great matchup. St. John's is undefeated in the Mid-Atlantic Rugby Conference, but can you overlook Virginia Tech? Division 2. IUP, the top dogs in the nation, still the number 1 side. Do you know what rhymes with conference championships is crazy? Great Lakes versus Allegheny. Grand Valley State University, still undefeated. That matchup going into conference championships is going to be an absolute crazy one. In men's D3, Wayne State, Babson University, going back and forth, 1-2, 1-2. But slides in, slips in, Slippery Rock, taking the number 2 spot over Wayne State. The D3 competition is going to heat up to the very end.
Wendy, who are some of the teams, as you look at this in women's college rugby, that come across to you as overrated, or I'm sorry, who come across to you as underrated as you look at some of those rankings?
For me, the underrated has got to be in women's D2, College of William and Mary. They're flying under the radar. They're making waves, though, in the Mid-Atlantic Conference. They're undefeated at 4-0, but they've proven themselves against tough competition. They recently upset number 15 Temple, 19-14. It was so tight. And now they look ahead to their next challenge on November 2nd against another top-ranked team, number 20 Delaware. They've got tons of wins under their belt, but can they keep the momentum and take down another top 20 team? That's the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, as I look at the overrated side of the things and put my black cap back on, I look at Wheeling. I mean, first off, unbelievable in women's Division I, we have a tie for number 1 in Wheeling and 2-time defending champion Michigan. So we have a 2-time defending champion going up against a first-year program that's undefeated. Those are some incredible storylines in and amongst themselves. But Wheeling, are they overrated at that tied number 1 spot? They've got a lot of lopsided wins, big scoring margins, but against some weaker opponents. A huge test, as you mentioned earlier, this Saturday at Walsh. That's obviously going to go a big, long way towards deciding the Allegheny. But when they get to the playoffs with that lack of quality competition throughout the season hurt them, we'll find out. Now let's throw it over here to Lance. It's out of that group. Anybody stick out to you as underrated, somebody that could be considered a little bit better and should be higher in our rankings?
Well, you got to go with the team that wasn't mentioned in the rankings when this season started. The boys from the Bayou, LSU, getting a big win against Tennessee and now find themselves in conference semifinal play.
Yeah, that's a huge one. LSU getting a big win there over the Vols in Tennessee, coming out of absolutely nowhere, undefeated this season, and now they've got a huge matchup there in the SCRC semis. The team that looks a little overrated to me, I'm going to go Division II and zoom in on the Georgetown Hoyas. They have had a few closer games, especially against Salisbury and Towson this fall, and there's a potential rematch coming in the MARC final. This weekend we got the MARC semis, and if whoever wins between that Salisbury-Towson rivalry likely to come through, I think could nip Georgetown the second time around. So that's my overrated team on the men's side. We are going to throw it to break, and when we come back, we are going to dive into Friday night rugby action, both what has just happened and what's to come.
Play with our hearts. We don't play with sticks, bats, or gloves. We don't wear shoulder pads or helmets. We keep playing when it hurts. And we leave everything on the field. What we wear must be built for our game.
Right, and we're back here to talk a little Friday Night Rugby. We are in Season 3 of Friday Night Rugby. That is National Collegiate Rugby's National Game of the Week, turning the bright lights on programs all across the country from every division, men and women. It's one of the best things that NCR does, frankly, and we've had a lot of great action since you've seen us on the air last, including a fantastic game down there in Texas, Wendy, between the Longhorns and the Aggies. Why don't you talk us through it?
Yeah, this was a great one. It was the debut of the Lone Star, as you mentioned, and it was an electric night. And what makes this really special is that, last year it was at Texas A&M and they won 96-5. Turnaround, complete sweet revenge this year, and Texas wins this one 99-5, an almost exact score. And I think the big difference here is we've got, of course, our alum coaches, Chris Carson and Sarah Biggie Dickerson. They brought some serious firepower and depth to the field, and this has been boosted by record turnout at practice following the USA Women's Olympic bronze medal. Senior captain Bella Rankin commanded the attack with 2 tries, with prop Sunshine Aofia and Madison Chapman both scoring hat tricks. And look at this one, the 8 also contributing there. Just a fantastic night for the Longhorns. And Longhorns were up that weekend, and the tower was orange.
Look, it is college rugby can be very difficult to predict, especially when you have a 180-point swing between 2 teams, same coaches from one fall to the next. That's absolutely bananas, but that's what we got on Friday Night Rugby. Also equal to predict is Eau Claire versus Stout. We had a huge matchup in the Battle of Wisconsin State Schools. Lance, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Blue Golds and the Blue Devils?
Stout walked into this matchup, both undefeated sides, on the doorstep of the conference playoffs. Winner gets the number 1 seed. And let me tell you, the battle for Wisconsin was everything we wished it would be. Close matchup at halftime, tied at half, and a fight all the way up and through referee injury time. Both teams laid it all out on the field, but still find themselves 1-2 in conference. This is what you ask for when you're talking about the top teams in conference leading into a playoff matchup.
And switching gears from men's Division 3 to women's Division 2, we had a clash of top-ranked cadets between Coast Guard and Norwich. Wendy, why don't you walk us through that one?
Yeah, this was another clash. You're right. It's a great word to use. Coast Guard took on Norwich, with the Bears delivering a commanding 65-7 victory. Coast Guard, led by head coach Sarah Price, controlled the game from start to finish, all the way through. Outside center Emma Briggs scored a hat trick, as did number 8 Caitlin Boggs, powering the Bears to an impressive win. For Norwich, this was a chance to boost their postseason resume, but they couldn't match the Bears' intensity. With this win, the Bears move closer to a North Atlantic Conference final rematch with New Hampshire, where a playoff berth is on the line.
Yeah, let's just have a little chat here about Friday Night Rugby, right? I mean, we just went from women's Division 1, an absolute blowout, 180-point swing from one season to the next, to men's Division 3, to women's Division 2, and then this coming, tonight you've got the Big River semifinals in men's Division 1. So literally every corner of the country, every division covered here. That's probably my favorite takeaway here from Friday Night Rugby. Wendy, any thoughts as you're the voice of this whole ship?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. And as you talked about at the top of the show, it's highlighting some of those programs that don't get the highlights, right? When was the last time we saw college D3 not at a finals or a nationals championship on TV, right? So it's absolutely fantastic. It's putting a spotlight on these wonderful programs. And we're going to talk more about player coaches in a bit. But I think it's just really cool that they get their moment in the sun and they get to show what their program is doing and what their players can do.
I get the distinct pleasure of talking to some of these coaches and players every week as I help write the previews for the website for these things. And the excitement for them to be able to play in front of their family and friends is, I think, very high on the priority list. Lance, you had the pleasure of doing that in college and after college quite a bit. What does it mean when mom and dad and cousins and everybody can see you play from around the country and then and share it on social?
It just makes it that much more special. And there's also a little bit of Saturday's a rugby day. No, Friday night is a rugby day as well. To play under those lights, to be able to play in front of your friends, your family, and also be seen on TV, to be broadcast. That is the dream. That is what you ask for. And it's good to see rugby growing in that way. Good on NCR for making that happen.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the best things really here is the stars that it makes. And let's dive right in here with one of the biggest stars of this season's Friday Night Rugby, Emma Briggs, a Coast Guard. Fantastic, Wendy.
Yeah, she's really just a standout player. You're starting at that outside position, and you'll see her. She does a lot of work off the ball as well, and here you'll see some of her distribution skills. And look at that. She took in those couple of defenders, but really it's here. Look at the positioning. She recognized already there was nobody outside, had the speed to get around the outside, and she did this 3 times in the match and had just Norwich scrambling. And you'll see another shot here. It's perfect positioning. She's got support on the outside, but has the confidence to go all the way in herself and get in that corner. They really liked that corner that night. They scored there a bunch. This one, she didn't quite get away, but look at the fend. That's what we wanted you to see. And just a fantastic player, and just can't wait to see more from her.
That's right. Emma Briggs, absolute star of Friday Night Rugby, the star of the Liberty Conference, the star of the Brown Bears, who are the #1 ranked team of the country. That's got to be the outside center, Tito Ajua. You've seen this man play, Lance. Tell us all about him.
Tito Ajua. You never met an operator smoother, the body mover, the try scorer himself. Brown University started this season without him and still shown that they were the cream of the crop, one of the best in the NCR. But once you add a player like him, not only U20, but also from over the pond, he just adds a different dynamic to this team, and already explosive on the outside. You drop that man in there, you're talking Tri-City whenever Brown shows up.
Yeah, Tito is one of the better players in the country to watch, and Brown has been turning him out year after year, and he might be one of the most exciting guys we've seen play in quite a while. I think just a sophomore, really young player, lots of rugby to be seen out of him. You haven't seen him yet, but I have a feeling you're going to in these airwaves coming up, these playoffs. All right, that's it for us here, and we're going to go throw it to break. And when we come back, we're going to take a little look at player coaches in the college rugby game and their impact. Player coaches, they're a necessary reality in college rugby. And this last month, NCR highlighted one, Emma Perry of Ohio University, as their coach of the month. She started playing in high school, winning a Pennsylvania state championship with Moon Area High School, then moved on to Ohio, started playing for the Bobcats, and started assistant coaching as a sophomore out of need for the Bobcats. She helped the team transition from just a 7-side, growing to a full 15s team, and winning their first 15s match last fall. This fall, she became the head coach at just 20 years old, helping grow the program from 13 to 35 players in her short time there. We just saw some highlights of 17th ranked in men's Division III, Wisconsin Eau Claire, who was also proudly player coached by a trio of guys. Virginia Tech, the Hokies, won the 2022 and 2023 Division I AA titles with a trio of player coaches at the helm, rotating year to year nonetheless. When it comes to growing rugby, we often talk about the large governing bodies and what the big membership organizations are doing. But if new players are the metric for growth, it's coaches who are at the coalface of recruiting, attracting, and retaining them. And to be so passionate about the community and the value of our sport, to be driving growth at such a young age is really a testament to rugby's next generation. Wendy, when you hear about player coaches like Emma Perry or people in their young 20s who aren't just full-time students, but also full-time athletes, and also going out and helping recruit, organize, administrate, and put a team on the field, that just kind of shows you the passion of rugby. What does that bring to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, this one's really close to home. I started at a club that was player coached at Oklahoma Roses, and now they have a full-time coach. And then I played in Austin, and we had player coaches sometimes. So it hits across the board. It hits in college and then at club as well. So I think, this is a really special place, and I think you highlighted perfectly that they can be the glue that holds everything together, and then they're supported sometimes by officers. Sometimes they're doing all of it, and it's a trio of support. And I think it's just, you're right. It's the heart of rugby, and we definitely are so special to put a spotlight on it.
Yeah, absolutely, Lance. It's not ideal. Obviously, every team would love to have the greatest coach in the world. Who wouldn't want to be coached by a fantastic, leader? But where it works, it seems like you can get a culture of a well self-coached team can almost be that secret sauce.
Yeah, because everyone has to buy in and do their part. You can't just depend on one person to have the vision for the team and you follow, but instead you definitely have to help out your compadre. They might be the center on your team. You can't leave them alone to do everything by themselves, so everyone plays a part. And I've worn that hat before as a player coach. And to see these college students, to see these young adults handling that responsibility and stepping up to the mantle that way, I commend them 1,000% because I know how difficult it is, and they're doing it way better than I ever could.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now we're going to go straight into the top 5. Let's hear from John Broker, the voice of Friday Night Rugby, as we look at our top 5 highlights.
Forward just a little. Blue Devils do well to reset their defense, looking for some inroads. Get that ball there to Wilt Conan. Little offload there to Schmidt, and first points of the game will come to the captain, Cal Schmidt. A little opportunistic move, beautiful offload. A senior from Silver Creek early here, just 2.5 minutes into the second half. And the Coast Guard Bears are picking up where they left off. Tate is going to move that across field a little wider. Briggs straightens this one up, puts a little offload in there to Boggs. Boggs by 1, by 2. Boggs vying for how many tries she can score in the game. We're looking to win that battle as she touches down another one. Caitlin Boggs, big, powerful run coming in there from Aaron Casselang. Casselang into contact. Good job there for the Longhorns to take that ball away. First player there had the rights to it after they blew people off that ball. So we have a long run coming here. He might go coast to coast. It's in the hands of Madison Chapman. Chapman has somebody chasing her, but the junior from Round Rock, Texas, in her own community, heads towards the line. She may score under the sticks, and it's going to be Madison Chapman. Scrum advantage here. Ball comes out to the number 8, Vig Bedore. Carolyn Vig Bedore makes a big run. Vig Bedore hands off one. She's headed for the line. She's going to salute the crowd with a cap she took off. She's into the try zone. Is she going to touch this one down? Indeed, she is. And great work there from the junior from Centerville, Virginia. Criminology major touches down, cuts the lead 17-5 in the Dartmouth end. Dartmouth going to go to the booth themselves, looking to get this downfield. It goes into the center. Lonsanur has to go back on this one, but Lonsanur is a silky smooth runner when he gets going. Gets up all the way to Leo Clayberg. Leo Clayberg breaks through. Clayberg gets it to Adjua. Adjua steps out of the tackle, and a late try here. Tito Adjua, 2 in a row. Danger Days kicking back to that backfield of the Brown Bears, and it pays off for Brown. And another try in.
That was the velvety voice of John Broker in our top 5. And now we're going to dive into our weekly wins. Lance, what's your win?
Wheeling CRC ring ceremony after winning the championship. Big step for that university. And I got a chance to talk to Coach Mike Geibel. He kept it really simple with me. He said, because rugby is such a erratic sport, the ball can bounce anyway. It's something special about not only getting the victory, but doing it in such dominant fashion, going undefeated during their entire 7th season. He wanted to give special thanks and consideration to the to the alumni. The alumni had an opportunity to give these guys the ring ceremony that they deserved, even though they had their chances to celebrate in other ways. To be able to have that support system reach out and do that ceremony for them was a big deal. He also stressed that winning the championship is very big, but for the freshmen to sit on the sideline and watch these upperclassmen and these previous year players be able to celebrate such a successful season made them even hungrier and gave them the opportunity to see what can happen with a little bit of hard work when you persevere and get everything done the way you're supposed to.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The Wheeling Cardinals have been knocking at the door, even when they were Wheeling Jesuit, at winning a CRC title, and now they finally break through and they get properly rewarded with the bling that they deserved. You love to see all that shininess going on those ring fingers. I'm sure social media absolutely exploded for those kids when it did. My win this week, we have got a heavyweight. Boy, there were 2 biggest stories of the year in rugby, were the women winning bronze in the Olympics in Paris. And then, of course, Tracy Schmidt-Young, who happens to be the wife of our contributor, Wendy Young. And we couldn't help but take the opportunity to talk about what is probably the biggest story in our sport in some time. And that was Tracy donating her liver to Mike Tolkien. This was absolutely massive. With a grim diagnosis of liver cancer and the need for a transplant, news broke in February that Premier Rugby 7's general manager, U.S. Rugby Hall of Famer, and former Eagles head coach Mike Tolkien was searching for a living donor. Our Wendy Young, a longtime rugby journalist and broadcaster, saw a post about Tolkien online and shared it with her wife, Tracy. And in July, 60% of Tracy's liver was transplanted to Mike, and now both are healthy and in recovery, as you can see, because we have Tracy right here with us. Tracy, what an incredible story of generosity and giving. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you said yes and how we ended up here?
Well, first of all, thank you for even putting me in the same category as the women winning the bronze. Like, yes, it was a great thing I did, but I don't know if we can go that far. Really, it was kind of an uneventful story. Wendy showed me the post, and we were like, yeah, let's do it. It was really not exciting. We were very calm and cool. And then after going through several steps, I had to fly to New York to do all the medical testing because that's where Mike lives, is New York City. And I remember standing on the streets outside of the hospital between my appointments, and I called Wendy and I was like, I think we might really have to plan because I think this is really going to happen. I don't know, something just came over me and I was like, I think I'm going to be a match. And sure enough, a week later, they called me and said, we're good to go if you're good to go. And I said yes. And 10 days later, we were living in New York for 30 days.
Wow, it's remarkable. I mean, one of the crazier things to me is, obviously your wife Wendy has done some commentating for PR7s. Mike is the GM of PR7s, but there's not much overlap. You guys didn't really know each other.
No.
You, of course, have a storied rugby career. You were going into the TRU Hall of Fame, is that correct? And you had to schedule the operation around your induction. That meant that Mike had to miss his U.S. Rugby Hall of Fame induction. So two members of their respective rugby communities, having never met, coming together over something like this is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I of course knew who he was because I followed PR7s and I of course followed the men's national team, but I had never met him like personally. So we met the Thursday before our surgery for the first time, went to dinner, and it was like we'd known each other our whole lives. I think that's what's really special about the rugby community is you automatically feel connected to people who you don't even know. I mean, in 2010, Wendy and I flew to England for the World Cup and we stayed with Scrum Queens and we had never met her in person until that day we stayed at her house. But we automatically just felt connected. So even though I didn't know Mike, I felt very drawn to helping him. And I was like, I have to help save his life. And that's inevitably why we decided to do it.
Well, on behalf of the rugby community, everyone who does know Mike and who doesn't, thank you very much for your contribution and for your generosity and for being you. And thank you for being an awesome rugby person and being an example for what that is.
Thanks for having me on today.
All right, we've got one more week of Friday Night Rugby action coming up for you, and it is a big one with the Big Rimmers semifinals double header. Up first, we have number 4 Wheeling going up against number 13 Iowa Central. Huge matchup. The Aaron Juma and the Fighting Cardinals against Iowa Central Cone Webb and the Fighting Tritons. Who you got in this one? Who do you like, Lance?
Sometimes you just got to go with what you know. I know that Wheeling is going to show up and do damage. A lot of respect for Iowa Central, taking nothing away from them. But when the lights come on, I'm going to go with Geibel every time. Wheeling, big.
Big. All right, big. All right. Cone Webb, you hear that? Tell your friends, Iowa Central, pretty good. And then we've got coming up right after that, number 7 Principia, the Thunder Chickens, going against number 12 Thomas More in the other Big River semifinals. Who do you like in this one, Lance?
I think that the Thunder is going to roar. But Thomas More is there for sure. I got Thomas More by a short margin. I'm taking a team from Kentucky to get a bucket.
I thought you were going to pick the Thunder Chickens for sure. I don't think that's a bad upset pick. The Principia has a very talented upperclassman team, but they're thin. Not a lot of depth in that, and especially up in the forwards, whereas I know the Thomas More Saints do. They got a lot of beef. It's going to be a great matchup. Both of these games are going to be fantastic, and they're leading into the NCR playoffs with the Division I playoffs and every division coming up. We've got plenty more on the College Rugby Show, the College Rugby Show, episode 3, right in the middle of the playoff season. But first, Friday Night Rugby.